Hello and welcome to this session. We're talking about investing in water for a toxic-free environment. And as I said when I was moderating a session this morning, I hope you're in the right session. And even if you're not in the right session, stay with us because this is going to be a good one. So investing in water, there really has not been anywhere near enough investment in water in Europe in recent years. And we know that the world is facing critical water problems. And it's a situation that's going to get worse with the booming population, with climate change. So we want to really kind of investigate in this session how investing in water, and this could be public or private investment, can actually be a sustainable finance opportunity. It can be a win-win investment. It can address several environmental challenges, so pollution, water scarcity, climate change, biodiversity loss. But at the same time, it contributes to the recovery and to the creation of jobs. So you see, that's where the win-win situation comes in. So we want to inspire you a little bit in this session and have a look at 3 water investment success stories that are really working towards this zero pollution ambition that we've been talking about throughout the whole of GreenWeek. So as usual, your questions via Slido. I think everybody's got the idea now if you've been to some of the other sessions. Basically, the code for Slido is EU GreenWeek 2021, and this session number is 10.3. So again, make sure you were asking questions in the right session because it could get very confusing otherwise. So my name is Kathy Smith. I'm a former journalist and moderator based in Brussels. Let me introduce our speakers to you. We have Tom de Wits, who is a policy advisor in the cabinet of the Minister of Justice and Enforcement and Environment, Energy and Tourism. It's a long title, in Flanders in Belgium. And Tom's going to tell us a little bit about how Flanders is investing in its Blue Deal for water. I mean, we tend not to think of Flanders or Belgium as a country that's got water problems, but it does. So we'll be hearing from Tom in a moment. Welcome to you. Yanis Vergos, the coordinator of the management body of Lake Karla in Greece. And Lake Karla is a Natura 2000 site. This is an amazing story, actually, of a lake that has been restored, drained in the 60s and brought back to life. So we're really interested to hear this story. It's like a little tour of Europe so far. You know, here we're in Belgium, then we're in Greece, and then now we're going to Sweden. I like this because we're all stuck at home at the moment. So at least we can do a bit of armchair traveling. Max Ludke is the senior advisor of the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency. And Sweden is using state aid grants to target emerging pollutants in water, such as microplastics, pharmaceuticals, big issues of today. And it's interesting to see how the Swedish government is tackling this issue. And the 4th member of our panel is Veronica Manfredi, who is the Director for Quality of Life in DG Environment at the European Commission. And I know that, Veronica, your directorate plays a key role in leading Europe towards its zero pollution ambition. So maybe you could start us off and really talk about the importance of investment in water. Thank you very much.
Dear Kathy, dear panelists, and in particular dear participants, thank you so much for this energizing start that we need, because I think we're arriving now at the 3rd day of this super intense Green Week on zero pollution. And I know that many of you have, are confronted also with choices, which session to follow. Well, you are in the right one. I promise this one is very interesting because it gets very, very concrete. If we can upload the PowerPoint presentation, a very short one I prepared to you. I know that we all are keen to engage in debates. I wanted essentially to stress that, well, of course, I do strongly believe that water can really help us in managing the current crisis, because as Kathy already said, investing in water and restoring nature can kickstart the economy. Every single euro we invest well in water management pays us back 30 times as much. It is really a crucial level for growth because the water sector already today includes almost 500,000 jobs, but also because all economic sectors need water to maintain their activities and contribute to our collective well-being. Today, we are not going to discuss about numbers and funding opportunities. Instead, we're going to showcase, as I was telling you, really inspiring water projects that each will show how investing in water means investing at the same time in society, in environment, and in the economy. So we can really create an harmonious relationship there. I don't see the PowerPoint presentation on the screen. I don't know whether it's me or there is a technical itch somewhere. Would be great if it could be uploaded. Otherwise, it's not a drama. Let's see. Wonderful. Yes. Are we on slide 2 already? So I hope. But first of all, indeed, let's look a moment at, let's explain briefly why we see that water is receiving this specific momentum in the context of the European Green Deal. Well, first of all, because the Green Deal, as my commissioner always like to stress, is inherently very, very blue. In the Green Deal, water is everywhere, even if I remember very well that when it was adopted, some of our, marine constituency and also water constituency initially was not 100% sure. Well, you find water everywhere because you find it, for example, we are discussing very much in those days about it in the Zero Pollution Action Plan, which is now specifically devoted to air, water, and soil. This will be the next slide, please. The Zero Pollution Action Plan is really no, sorry. We are mixing up. My apologies. It's the previous one. You can go backwards. I'm sorry for that. Okay. The Zero Pollution Action Plan is a pathway to a healthy planet for all, which sets this integrated vision of a world where by 2050, pollution is reduced to levels which are no longer harmful, neither to human health nor to the natural ecosystems. This is not a utopian zero. It's really a program for integrated assessment of all the data and knowledge that we have to progressively better tackle pollution at source. This action plan is setting 6 targets to be achieved by 2030 and announces 33 concrete actions which build up other actions which have been announced by other Green Deal strategies, and also is subject to a review clause in 2025 in order to enable the entire European Union to measure concrete progress made until then and possibly further adjust both the level of ambition and the typology of targets and flagship actions we have identified. Also, all the other Green Deal strategies pull in the same direction. For example, we have the biodiversity strategy, which sets an objective of at least 25,000 kilometers of rivers to be restored to free-flowing state by 2030, and also establishes the objective of protecting and restoring 30% of our lands and 30% of our seas. Restoring nature is a crucial element of our recovery plan as well, which of course provide immediate business and investment opportunities. Via the farm to fork strategy, the Commission aims to reduce the use of chemical and more hazardous pesticide by 50% by 2030. This objective is to have at least 25% of European land cultivated as organic farming. As you imagine, that as well, the implications for water are really important. And last but in no way least, the Circular Economy Action Plan foresees a number of actions to promote water efficiency and water use. Kathy was rightly stressing how much climate change is bringing this need to better manage our water. And we have also the new climate adaptation strategy, which by developing and implementing innovative and nature-based solutions to respond to climate challenges also provides investment opportunities to restore the use economy in several sectors, energy, construction, and so on. So, but all these transformative strategy and action, of course, can be really drivers for investing in water intelligently. Can we now move to the next slide, please? Where basically we can see that also our, sorry, if you can move still one slide. I'm so sorry about this slide issue. Voila. Our fitness check on water law that we concluded back in 2019 concluded that one of the major obstacles today for reaching the good status of our rivers is precisely the lack of investment in water management. Today, with the recovery plan as well, but in general, I would say also with a more ambitious MFF, multi-annual financial framework for Europe, we have a really unique opportunity to build back in a better manner. In particular, to support the recovery, the European Union is making available a record 1.82 trillion euro combined from the dedicated recovery facility and the 2020-21-27 EU budget. We have also launched, and it's important for the audience to be aware, a specific call under Horizon 2020, which has 1 billion euro to support Green Deal action. So all the financial instruments of the European Union are there to support these ongoing efforts. So basically, my key message today is we are in a unique moment. We are working very closely also with the colleagues of the OECD to develop financing and investment strategies with the member states that are aimed at equipping also our member states at national level to devise water investment plans which make sense for their people, make sense for their economy. I think we need all hands on deck to get this done in the proper manner. And I'm really delighted to have with us today these three representatives from Sweden, Belgium, and Greece to showcase how can this become a reality. Thank you again.
Thank you very much indeed, Veronica. I mean, that statistic that every euro invested well in water management pays back 30 times. I mean, that is an astounding statistic. And then the fact that you say that the Green Deal is blue leads us so perfectly onto our first speaker, because we're talking about the Blue Deal of Flanders. And Tom de Wits, I told you, is from the, well, I'll have to say that this long Ministry of Justice and Enforcement's Environment, Energy and Tourism. It's a very long title. But Tom, tell us what's happening in Flanders in terms of the investments that are happening for in water, why it's necessary in Flanders, and how you feel you're going to benefit from these investments. We're not hearing you, Tom.
No, right now you should be hearing me with all the pleasure. Thank you very much, Kathy, for the introduction. Indeed, it is a long title. We can just say Minister of Environment. That will do. But yeah, the question is at first, why a blue deal? Because as Kathy mentioned before, Flanders doesn't appear to be a dry region. Not at all. It rains a lot in Flanders. But when you look at it in an international perspective, you see that Flanders indeed is a dry region. We are even drier than Turkey, or even drier than Spain. But how come? So we have a lot of rain. Most of the time the rain falls during the winter, but also we have a lot of dry periods during the spring and during the summer. But the main problem is that the rain that falls during the winter, we're not able to hold that water. We just flush it away. We straightened our rivers, or we muffled our rivers during the last centuries and decades for land purposes. That, in combination with a highly dense populated area that Flanders is, but also with high water demand for the population, but also for water intensive economical activities, and of course the climate change, which is making us having drier and longer drier periods, that urged us to take drastical solutions and to adopt the Blue Deal, which has been adopted last summer of 2020, which is a holistic plan of more than 70 concrete measures, both in terms of wetlands, restoring wetlands, but also in stimulating innovation to tackle those problems in a structural manner. That means that we have structural problems, which means that we need also structural solutions. We need to leave the idea that water is a linear product. We have to look at it as something that we can close the circle on. So we have to address the roots of the problems. How do we do that? Well, quite easy. We need to give water more space and more time to infiltrate into the soil. That, but also in combination with just common sense. We need to use water in a smarter way. We need to use less water, but also in a more efficient way. We do that in three ways. First of all, and that's the baseline actually, we want to value the water. We need to revalue the water and the value that has been given to the water. For instance, drinking water, can we use it for each and every process? No, we don't think so. So what we have to do, or what we're going to do, is first of all, we're going to invest, also public investment, but also supporting private investments. we are going to stimulate new approaches, so new technologies will be stimulated, but also due to regulation. For example, in a permit procedure for a new building, it might be necessary that a water scan will be a precondition. I will have to, yeah. Normally we should go to the next slide now. So there you go. That means that we have to rethink the model. So we have to rethink the linear model, and we have to evolve towards a circular model. We know that circular model in terms of waste management, but we also have to adapt it right now to the water circle. Circularity is actually one of the pillars of the Blue Deal, and that idea has to become the new standard. But if we want that idea to become the new standard, that means that other water sources also have to become a reliable option, an economical reliable option, instead of using just tap water, because that's the easiest water. The water is already there, we can just easily use it. But we have to think about new models and new kinds of water. So that means that we have to stimulate the new business models behind those types of water. That for example, can be in a food production company in the food industry, where lots of water is being used during the process, but in the end, the company doesn't need that water anymore. So what does it do with it? It just dumps it. But how can we give that water that is just being dumped a second life? How can we perhaps upgrade it again to drinking water quality and drinking water freshwater standards, so we can re-inject it or inject it to the water net, or perhaps just look at it and say, okay, this water quality is still okay, but not suitable for drinking. So why not use it for greenkeeping purposes or for agricultural purposes? A second thing that we want to do is we need to balance our capacity. As I mentioned, we have high peaks, both in rainfall during winter, but also high peaks in terms of demand during the summer. So we have to balance those two. We have to make sure that supply and demand can correspond in a better way. Therefore, we are investing in a reserve, in reservoirs, so we can hold the water and we can use the water when we need it, when water is becoming scarcer and scarcer during the summer. So that means that we're investing in new sources of water. We are stimulating investments in reuse, but also in off-grid systems in, let's say, remote areas, although remote is very, very relative in Flanders. So what does that mean in terms of water quality? Well, of course, and luckily, we don't have to start from a blank page in the water industry or in the water sector, because we can already learn a lot from, for instance, the energy sector, where new sources of energy have entered the model or have entered the arena, as I can say it. So that is one thing we can learn from energy, but we can also learn from the waste sector, because if we want to evolve to a zero liquid discharge, we have to keep in mind, or we have to look at the idea that solutions that we are using right now are quite often end-of-pipe solutions, where waste materials are sorted out of the water at the end of the line, at the end of the water journey. But we have to rethink that model and make sure that decentral purification has or will also become a viable option. So we can take the waste materials out of the water. It will not only save us a lot of energy during the process, but it will also generate new resources. But how do we do that? We do that, for instance, by pinching, using the pinching method. And pinching means that we're going to integrate water systems or water processes. We do that in Flanders, for example, by stimulating companies and by supporting companies financially that have a project which consists of 3 or more companies that work together to make sure that they lower their water use in a total. Also, gray water is something we have to think about. So gray water is slightly contaminated water. It's something we have to think about. How can we use it more and in a more efficient way? But high quality recycling of water, which is very important, costs a lot of energy. But if we move towards decentralization, we can use less energy, but also it can provide us resources. Let me give you an example. In Flanders, we have a mirror producing company, and they had a problem because at the end of their production process, they had water which was highly contaminated with silver. So they worked together with the University of Ghent, some water companies, and they provided a solution where they take out, or they remove the silver from the water. And right now, instead of a burden, the silver and the waste actually becomes an advantage, because not only are they producing mirrors, they're still producing mirrors. That is their baseline. That's the thing what they do. But right now they can also sell silver. So from a disadvantage, they created an economical advantage. And then normally we should go to the last slide. And there we go. Here's my last slide. Sorry. So in a nutshell, water is crucial for Flanders because we use a lot of water, but we're not able to manage it, we're not able to manage to hold the water we have. So right now we are a region that has structural problems with water, structural shortages of water. So we want to evolve from a region with water problems, water issues, towards a leading region, a region that provides solutions for those questions. And therefore, we adopted the Blue Deal with structural solutions, but also based on two very simple principles. That is that we have to do more with the water that is available to us, but also that we have to use the water that is available in a very smarter and more efficient way. So I thank you very much for your time and your attention. And I'm really looking forward to the discussion we will have afterwards.
Thank you very much indeed, Tom. I love the expression of giving water more space and more time. Can I just ask you very quickly, you give the example of the mirror company, but this idea of new business models, how advanced is it, and how quickly can that be established and mainstreamed, if you like, because it has to be mainstreamed, one assumes, to really make an impact?
That's a very good question. Of course, regulation here seems to be somehow of a burden. But on the other hand, the Blue Deal has set something free. I'm sensing in Flanders. A lot of companies are right now thinking about, hey, we have a water problem, or we are using water as a product in our process. How can we turn that into an advantage or lower the costs of that water? So water is becoming more and more important, and we truly see that. But how do we get to that new business models? Of course, we have the smaller companies, but also in Flanders we have 6 freshwater companies, so the drinking water companies. And for the first time in history, they work together. They made up an investment plan, which is aligned through the companies. And one of the things that they are addressing there are those new technologies, because as a lot of companies say, hey, I'm not going to use that tap water anymore, but instead I can just use rainwater for that process. It means they are going to lose money. So they also have to make sure that they don't miss the train. And so they will have to invest in those new technologies. So I'm really looking forward to what those technologies will be. But I think that a lot of companies, both big and small, are breaking up that market.
That's really interesting to hear. Well, thank you very much indeed. We'll perhaps talk some more about that in a moment, but let's move to Greece now. And Yanis Vergos from the management body of Lake Kala. Lake Kala is about 300 kilometers north of Athens. It's on the Thessaly plain. I was looking on Wikipedia, and it said that the god Apollo married on its shores. I love that idea. But this is such an interesting story, because in the 1960s, we're not seeing you you're very dark, actually, Yanis. I don't know whether you can get any more light on, but anyway, the gods maybe could provide some more light for you. I love the idea that a lake drained in the 60s, which has been brought back to life. So do tell us the story of that.
Well, I'm really sorry, because we cannot make this presentation from the outside, where it is still very sunny and lush green. And you could see the birds mating, singing, searching for food in this restored lake of 40 square kilometers. So we're going to talk about lake restoration. Lake Karla was a wetland in the eastern Thessaly, the plain of eastern Thessaly, Greece. And we will analyze the pressures which may affect the restoration process, linking them with the wetlands ecosystem services. We're not going to take, we will not discuss about euros, but we will discuss about the ecosystem services, which I think is most important when investing money in a wetland or in water as general. So, what is the lake, the Karla Reservoir as a case study? It was one of the most important wetlands in Greece, so 120 square kilometers. But the drainage, which took place in 1962, created a series of environmental problems, which were the drawdown of the aquifer, the change of the area's microclimate, the increase in flood frequency, and the destructions of the area's ecological balance. So, in the early 2000s, one of the biggest environmental projects in Europe, not only in Southeastern Europe, but in Europe as a whole, which costed almost 250 million euros, began to be implemented. It was the Lake Karla restoration, which was the objective of this effort. The protection of the basin against flood hazard, the restoration of the ecological function of the wetland, and covering a part of the watershed agricultural demand. I'm sure you haven't been in the plain of Thessaly, but it is an agricultural region. It's the biggest plain in Greece, and we have intensive cultivation of cotton, of wheat, of corn, and of alfalfa, mainly. So let's. This is a map of the area. This is a map of the area. You can see the Lake Karla. And this restoration, it was not easy at all to be accomplished. Let's talk about the valuation. We had habitat fragmentation. The restoration measures was a tree planting project, a creation of land corridors, of buffer zones. What is the status now? The status is a good conservation status on terrestrial habitats, littoral habitats, connectivity, and ecosystem naturalness. How about the ecosystem services achieved? We have raw materials for energy and maintaining conserving population habitats. Water availability, irrigation and drinking water. We have creation. The restoration measure was creating a main reservoir, distributing irrigation channels, drinking water system indirect use after the recharge of groundwater aquifer. The status now. Well, we have completed the construction of the irrigation system, but there is an incomplete construction of the drinking water system. How about the ecosystem services? Well, the agricultural crops, we have them irrigated, but the drinking water is underway. The drinking water is underway. Let's go to another evaluation. Well, we have the flood protection, which is regulating. Now we have the agricultural crops, which is a cultivated protected area from flooding, about 1,854 square kilometers. We have a land barren, protected from flooding. We have a sediment regulation. This is not estimated yet. And water quality. Well, this is a drawback because 5 years ago, the condition according to the water directive was bad. Today is poor. But we think as the whole project is being regulated through the ecosystem processes, the ecological status will ameliorate in the years to come. The recreation, water sports or sport fishing are still not active in the reservoir, but we're working on projects in the years to come. So a big project project of ecotourism will take place in the area. Well, biodiversity, I think this is the most successful part of the project. We have 200 species of bird, which most of them are endangered and protected, which either winter or nest during summer and spring in the area. 200 species of bird and 14 species of fish. Let's forget about biodiversity. Raw materials for energy. This is not estimated yet, but the population habitat conservation will be estimated in the years to come. The agricultural crops, well, this is provisioning. We have an area of 600 acres around the lake, which is being irrigated, which was not irrigated in the past. As I said, the project of drinking water will take place in the years to come. The water will not be pumped directly from the lake, but there will be drills in points around in the watershed, where from the aquifer the water will be drilled to the nearby cities of Volos and Larissa, which are about 350,000 inhabitants both. So, concluding remarks, because I don't want to spend your time. Lake Arla was and still remains a freshwater agro-ecosystem subjected to multiple pressures. We have anthropogenic pressures as urbanization, agriculture, land use changes, which are accepted stressors, which cause nutrient loading and over-abstraction. This is not surprising at European level, since the most significant pressures on European surface water bodies are hydromorphological pressures, diffuse pressures, agricultural, and water abstraction. So the fresh waters provide multiple benefits and services to the local societies. We have made a great effort to address their deterioration, both at local level, at regional level, and in the central government. The restoration project of Lake Arla, even 3 years ago, addressed a wide array of services applying to traditional hard solutions, but also natural soft solutions as buffer strips, artificial wetlands, based on eco-hydrology principles. Karla project, we can say that it is almost a success story in terms of ecology, since there is an improvement of its conservation status over the last 10 years, as I formerly said. Up to now, it is also a success story in terms of water demand, mainly for irrigation, but without achieving sustainable hydrological management. We can say that Karla is a bitter story in terms of water quality. We understand that the shift to meso and oligotrophication is a long-term process strongly linked to sustainable hydrological management. The achievable water ecosystem state, although delivers ecosystem services, is still far from the delivery of economic and societal goods. Well, we have to review the hydroecological processes and then remodify the initial restoration plan, taking account the new green policy. But the whole project is a success story as a whole. And Kathy, I'm waiting for your questions, not only from you, but from the audience too.
Well, I'm sure there will be plenty. Let me just ask you now. I mean, you call it almost a success story because it's still early days. But I mean, there was 250 million euros invested, public money, European money, I think. Will you win that back if you like? I mean, was it a good investment? Will it be a good investment?
I think that the investment was a win-win investment. Because we expect that we will have a water quality enhancement, we will have a food production, tourism and recreation as bird watching, sport fishing, and water sports. I think it will be a success story in the years to come. It is still a young lake. It is only functioning for 2 or 3 years since the whole project was being finished. So there is a lot of things to be expected from the future. both from the management body and from the regional authorities too, which we hope more money in planning is about to be thrown in this region.
And of course, you haven't been able to develop tourism because of COVID, one assumes.
In the couple of years before the COVID pandemic, we had a rise in the tourists coming in the area, both from Europe and from Greece, to several thousands. Unfortunately, the last 1 year and a half has been rather disastrous, but we are still optimistic for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm sure there will be more questions, but let me thank you very much indeed, Yannis. Let me move on to Mats Lutke now, from Sweden, from the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency. So Max, tell us about this project where basically state aid grants are being made available for local municipalities to invest in plants to deal with microplastics and pharmaceuticals. Now, this is no fault of Max at all. We don't have your presentation, your slides. You know this, Max. Nobody else knows this. Unfortunately, you can't present the slides, but I think you'll be able to still tell us a good story. I'm sorry about that. Not your fault.
Yeah, we will transition into an interview between the two of us.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Maybe all the others can feel free to join in.
Well,
if they want to.
Let's do it like that then. So let me tell me first of all then, why did you decide to do this? Why did the government decide to do this?
Yeah, I think we need some background for the Swedish context. I would say that most Swedish people have some kind of environmental awareness ingrained in them. I remember when I was a kid, we still have some kind of environmental awareness in our curriculum in school, and I used to watch TV shows when I was a kid from public service, teaching us you must always pick up the trash and so on. And there has been some kind of like minor environmental scandals in Sweden, not maybe from one single polluter, but we have had and still have recommendations aimed at pregnant women not to eat fish that comes from the Baltic Sea out of concerns for micropollutants and so on. So I think we have a sense of that micropollutants is a potential problem. But with regards to actually doing something about it, I think a lot has happened the previous years, and that is, I would say, largely due to some major organizations with either democratic and or financial backing that has actually made policy briefs and increased the awareness of the problem.
So when we're talking about micropollutants, let's be sure we know what we're talking about. What are we talking about in the water then here? Pharmaceuticals, plastics?
Yes, and then it gets technicals, but it's basically chemical names. Chemicals or compounds that we use in the society that is in very, very low concentrations, but can still together for themselves or together be potentially toxic or cause unwanted effects in the ecosystem and also for us humans.
So water treatment in Sweden, if I understand it, is done on a local and regional level. So the government was then trying to dangle a carrot by suggesting that they could provide state aid or grants for municipalities. Is this what it is to deal with micropollutants?
Yes, that's correct. And I'm not an expert on how governance is in other countries, but at least in Sweden, we actually have a very high degree of sovereignty for regional and local authorities to implement our pretty fussy environmental legislative framework, which is based on a code of what is it called now in English? Well, environmental consideration rules. And there is a high degree of freedom for regional and local authorities to interpret those regulations. And that also means that while they have this responsibility, there's also a degree of it's voluntary for them in many cases. Of course, the state could decide to just control everything top down, but so far the system seems to work pretty well with the initiative coming from closer to the people and local decision makers with democratic mandate. Of course.
But the fact of having to sort of encourage with state aid and grants, does that mean there was in a way a reluctance to spend the money at municipal level? Is that why there needed to be the impetus at government level?
I think it's also a question of how much resources you have available. So for the local and regional authorities or the societal context, it's hard maybe to get the funding to get started. So I'm not a part of the government, so I can't speak for them. But I'm guessing that is the thought, that there needs to be some kind of seed money to start to build experience and provide platforms so that the regional and local authorities can learn from each other's experiences.
So what will the grants be used for specifically then?
I'm here today to talk about 2 grants. There are other examples too, but the ones that I am a part of administrating, the first one goes to municipal wastewater treatment plants. Only municipalities control the wastewater treatment plants in Sweden, and they can apply for grants for investment project or pre-studies trying to investigate what is the opportunity for us to install technology for advanced wastewater treatment, as we call it. That is treatment that is supposed to get rid of micropollutants. We already have good cleaning of eutrophication compounds like nitrogen and phosphorus and so on, but micropollutants is something that to some degree can slip through the wastewater treatment plants. And the other part is a call for investment projects and pre-studies that has the aim of reducing the amount of microplastics in stormwater or urban runoff water. That is the water that is generated when rain hits the cities, and it can take all kinds of trash or whatever is lying around in the streets and bring them down to their sewer collection system, which eventually ends up in the sea or at the wastewater treatment plants. So those are the 2 kinds of grants that we have.
And
in this context.
The problem generally isn't any worse in Sweden than anywhere else, I assume, and the technology exists, but it's just that you really want to make sure that your waters are the best that they possibly can be.
Yes, we at the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency had a government commission where we looked at that, and one of the main conclusions was that there is a need, but that need, as you indicated, was not based on speaking for the general Swedish context. That the need was not based on a fear for acute toxicity for either humans or the environment, rather out of concerns for possible long-term effects. We know that there is an ever-increasing pressure with regards to both the amount and the types and different types of compounds that we use in society. So it's something that will not likely go away unless we do something. And it's basically trying to do something before it becomes a problem.
Yeah,
we know the mechanisms. We know we can find the compounds out in the environment, and we know that some of them also bioaccumulate. That is, that they stay in organisms and they move higher into the food chains.
Great. Have my questions allowed you to say everything you were going to say? Because if so, we'll move into a general conversation.
Please.
Okay, lovely. Well, thank you very much indeed for telling us what's happening in Sweden. So let's now, and please do send some questions on Slido if you have any. We're not getting anyone at the moment, but I've got plenty I can ask of my own. Maybe we can move back to Flanders, Tom, and you mentioned just in passing that regulation is one of the issues that could be a bit of a stumbling block. Tell us some more about that. I mean, we're talking about your Blue Deal and your aim for more circularity in water.
Well, one of the things in regulations is that regulations do not change that quickly as innovation does. So we have to keep up the pace with the innovation, and that sometimes is difficult because, in my opinion, regulation has also need to be something that stimulates and leaves plenty of room and space for that innovation. So in a way, it has to be ambitious, but it cannot be restricting in the same time. So that's going to be difficult, but that's a challenge we are.
But in what way restricting? Is this because the legislation says that you have to have a certain purity of water, and you're suggesting we don't always need that purity, or what
yes,
is it?
Yes, indeed, that's it. Sometimes we do not need that purity of water for certain processes. So we have to take a step back and try to look out of the box and see what kinds of water do we need and who can provide that type of water. Because, for instance, the example I gave of the food producing company, they also can become a water producer by not just dumping the water, but then just reselling the water, and injecting that water in the water net. So in that way, when they become a producer, they're also bounded with quality norms. So that's something we have to think about, how we are going to regulate that.
That's interesting. Veronica, what do you think about that when you hear about the rules not keeping up with the innovation?
Well, my first thought is that indeed this is a real issue. Although we always try at European level, at least to be, as we like to say, technology neutral, so somehow not to put, specific requirements about which type of technology has to be followed to achieve certain results. Still, I tend to believe that it's true that in particular in the water sector, with digitalization, we have done an amount of progress which is not yet sufficiently well captured by the current regulatory framework, and we can achieve impressive results in better managing our water streams. Somehow, with the recent recast of the Drinking Water Directive, we have been trying to give a push into that direction, because we have stressed the importance for the water supplier to be very, very transparent, also vis-a-vis the users, so that somehow you start creating also a better relationship of trust between the ones that provide you the tap water at home and you as a user. But you also will see much more clearly from your water bill, for example, when there are issues linked to leakages. And who of us wants to know that, and this is a fact, across the EU, as an average, we lose 28% of the water we transport. This is dramatic. Today, with the technology, we can identify much more fast where the problems are occurring, become better in preventing these type of problems. And then the other point that Tom makes that I fully subscribe to is, do we always need the same type of quality of water for everything we do? He is absolutely right. It was under this rationale that we negotiated last year, already 2 years ago, time flies, the water use regulation, because we wanted to agree on common parameters for the type of minimum quality that you need when you're using that water for irrigation. So, with different standards, by the way, if you're irrigating a strawberry as opposed to irrigating a product that is destined not to be consumed raw. But in general, there is a lot of space for having this, I would say, more flexible approach, and reusing water also from the wastewater treatment plants. I mean, absolutely. Yeah. Voila. So, and also I would say just a little tip, because not everyone may know, but in the framework of the revision of the Industrial Emission Directive, we're also looking into more circular management of water in industrial processes. And there, honestly, right, Belgium is the leader, especially in the beer sector.
Right. Yes. Good. Good. There's a question here. It's great to hear about the collaborative initiatives and funding. Collaboration is key and can't be done by working in isolation. What are the views of the panel? Yanis, what about the sort of collaboration that you've had to the partnerships that you've had to create in replenishing Lake Karla?
Well, as an advice for similar projects that we would like to implement a multi-purpose water project as Lake Karla, the consultation with the stakeholders, I think, is the first thing to do. As a multi-purpose can be a double-edged sword, all of the stakeholders' needs as breeders of livestock, farmers, small industries, of course, cities which need of drinking water, urban cities. So it is of a primary essentiality the project to be carefully planned, but also consulted between all these stakeholders.
Was there any resistance from local people? I mean, the reason the lake was drained, I think, in the beginning was because there had been malaria and mosquitoes and some flooding. Yes. But then the idea of rebuilding it was that also
a bit controversial scenario, because some people wanted the lake to be restored, as others which used the area for pastures, for the stock, for the livestock, they were not so fond of the project. But I think as years pass by, they all see that the perspectives of this project, and I think slowly the opinion has been changing in the area.
Good. Well, let me ask a question here. This would be for Max. Advanced wastewater treatment is energy demanding. How do you balance the potential win with less chemical pollution of waters with negative climate impact? It's just the extra energy involved in advanced wastewater treatment.
Yes, very tough question. That is one of the big challenges that we see that we have ahead of us. So it's true, like you say, that even if we optimize for one environmental goal, like a toxic-free environment, we still have to take in consideration that it also costs resources, and any energy use will have an impact on the climate goals, for example. And I think that what we have to do is to look at each, if possible, look at each individual circumstance and try to make the best decision. But in the end, it's up to our politician, the decision makers to make those calls.
And I presume you make a decision as to sort of what level of purity the water should reach, because you could go on forever. I mean, again, it's going back to this idea of not necessarily having the purest of water for every use.
Yes, that's so true. So, for example, in Sweden, we have the luxury of having abundant sources of fresh water. That is not the case for other countries in the EU, and especially not if you consider the whole world. So for us, maybe it would make sense to clean the water to a certain degree. In some cases, have it super clean, like lab scale water, if we need to protect a rare species in the environment, or to use it for some kind of industrial process or irrigation of some sensitive soils and so on. But in other cases, maybe it's enough to just do a little, and maybe we don't have to have the end of pipe cleaning system in the first place. In many cases, maybe the upstream measures and source control is enough to have a sufficient quality water.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. That's interesting. There's one for Tom here. What are your motives when drafting the Blue Deal? Why especially in Flanders? And what are the expected financial and research advantages? Now, the research advantages is interesting because, you talked about looking for the technology. There are, I know, a couple of big research centres in Flanders that are probably involved. And one assumes, if we're talking about the economic benefits of investing in water, this would mean that any research or breakthroughs here could be sold on to elsewhere. So, I mean, in Flanders, I'm in Belgium, so I'm saying here. But you can see that the wider economic benefits of this.
Yeah, definitely. First of all, the Blue Deal, of course, is a program that is used or that is meant to solve our own problems, our drought problems, our water issue problems. But in many cases and in many levels, by creating a better water quality, by getting more cleaner water, but also by restoring wetlands. And so in that way, we also want to create touristical and economical extras and surpluses. But you are true. You're right. Indeed, the technology that we have here in Flanders, we can also use them elsewhere. For instance, in remote areas or abroad. So I believe that the Blue Deal has also an export part in it, but it's of course not the main goal of the Blue Deal.
And how do you calculate your return on investment? I mean, how much money is being put into it, and how do you calculate whether it's worthwhile?
There's more than 400 million euros put into the Blue Deal. 343 of that comes from EU funding, so thank you very much. But how do we look at the money that we put into it and what we gain from it? It's not always easy to put that in numbers or in financial numbers, because we also have, as mentioned before, it's a Blue Deal, but it's also a Green Deal, because we gain a lot of advantages for our ecological systems. The last 50-60 years in Flanders, we lost more than 75% of our wet nature. So that means that we lost also a lot of biodiversity. Of course, we will not restore all of those 75%, but we will have to restore some of those ecosystems as well, because that is actually the cheapest and most interesting option as well, also for clearing for clearing the water, but also to give time and space to water to infiltrate in the soil.
So, I mean, you can understand public investment, but private investment might be more complicated. What is your view, Veronica, on that? Whether how you can convince private investors to come into this world of water?
Thank you for the question, because it goes to the heart of the problem. I would say for years, it has been extremely difficult to calculate all the co-benefits derived out of proper water investment. And I think that today, for the first time, because of a very strong policy push that is coming at EU, and I would say also, of course, United Nations level, we eventually see that also at investors level, there is much more readiness to connect the dots. First of all, let's not forget that it is now, I think, the 5th or 6th year in a row that we see that water scarcity issues and water-related problems, climate change impacts, are scoring highest among the recognized business risks by the World Economic Forum. So the big CEOs of the biggest corporation gathering every year do identify this as something that is harming, threatening their overall sustainability. And I think this is really the result of the facts. First of all, we're all facing changes, but also the result indeed of, much better, much increased awareness and connection of dots. So there is work ongoing also with the colleagues of the OECD to really provide everyone with a very accurate methodology to calculate benefits. And there is work ongoing also in the taxonomy group. You may know that the European Commission has adopted recently this taxonomy regulation that has exactly the purpose of driving the investment towards the most sustainable choices. And the idea is precisely to more and more empower investors to understand the return on investment that they can make out of investing in water. And I think that the case are hinting to the rules. You hear it yourself. It's tourism, it's nature restoration. That then means you can spare cost for climate adaptation. Think of flood protection, so plenty of co-benefits that need to all to be measured. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much indeed. We're running out of time. Just, I want you all just to come find a phrase or say something that, one word, the importance of investment and the encouragement for people to invest. How important is it? Just tell me, you know, in one phrase, Tom, why is it so important that we should invest in water?
Because water is from a strategic importance, but also we just need the water. It's just as simple as that. It's no rocket science. We just need the water.
Okay, it's not rocket science. What would you say, Max?
I would say that we should consider each citizen as a possible investor, and we need to make it clear what everyone has to gain from a better environment.
Lovely. Yanis?
Well, as a biologist, I would say that life consists of more than 75% of water. So this is the answer. But I would say that water is not a renewable source. I think this is the core of the problem.
Thank you very much indeed. And Veronica, very, very briefly, one phrase.
Would you invest in life? If so, invest in water.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. So thank you all very much indeed. We had some really great examples there. As usual, not enough time to get into the detail because there was so much more to say, but it did inspire us. And that was the idea of this session, to really get a sort of sense of what is happening out there and how actually investing in water can actually reap so many benefits, either financially or in terms of the planet. So thank you very much indeed. Enjoy the rest of Green Week. Thank you to the organisers, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.